The gunshot echoed through the narrow alleyway behind the Silver Dollar Saloon in Wichita, Kansas, and Dahlia Owens pressed herself against the rough wooden wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribcage. She had only stepped out the back door to escape the stifling heat and cigar smoke inside, needing a moment of fresh air on this sweltering July evening in 1881. But what she witnessed in those few seconds would change everything. 3 men stood in the dim light cast by a lantern hanging crooked on a post. The tallest one, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place in Wichita, held a smoking revolver. At his feet lay Samuel Pritchard, the mayor's nephew, blood blooming across his white shirt like a dark flower. The killer's face was clearly visible in the lamplight, his cold eyes devoid of remorse. Beside him stood 2 other men, one of them wearing a deputy's badge that glinted in the shadows. Dahlia's breath caught in her throat. She knew that deputy. Everyone in town knew Harrison Blackwell, the corrupt lawman who had somehow avoided every accusation thrown his way. But now she understood why. He worked for men like this, men who killed without hesitation. "That takes care of our problem," the well-dressed man said, holstering his weapon. Pritchard should have kept his mouth shut about what he saw at the railroad office. "What do we do with the body?" the deputy asked, same as always. "The river." Dahlia took a step backward, her hand reaching for the door handle behind her. Her boot scraped against a loose board, and the sound, barely louder than a whisper, might as well have been a cannon blast in the quiet night. All 3 men turned toward her hiding spot. "Who's there?" the killer demanded. Dahlia did not wait to find out what would happen next. She yanked the door open and ran through the kitchen of the saloon, ignoring the startled cook's shouts. She burst through the main room where patrons were drinking and playing cards, their faces blurring as she rushed past. She could hear footsteps behind her, heavy boots on the wooden floor. The summer night air hit her face as she emerged onto Main Street. The town was still bustling with activity despite the late hour. Cowboys from nearby ranches mingled with railroad workers and shopkeepers. Dahlia's mind raced. She could not go to the law because the law was part of this. She could not go home to her small room above the dress shop where she worked, because that would be the first place they would look. She ducked into another alley, her lungs burning, her dark hair coming loose from its pins. She had to think. She had to find someone she could trust. But who? The answer came to her as she pressed herself into the shadows between 2 buildings. Sheriff Garrett Kane. He had only been in Wichita for 6 months, brought in from Dodge City to clean up the town after the previous sheriff had been shot in a botched robbery. Kane had a reputation for being incorruptible, a man who followed the law to the letter. If anyone could help her, it would be him. But getting to him meant crossing town to the jailhouse, and she could hear men shouting now, calling to each other as they searched for her. They would be watching the main streets. Dahlia gathered her skirts and moved through the back alleys, staying in the shadows. She knew this town well, had lived here for 3 years since coming west from Philadelphia after her father's death. She had been 20 years old then, determined to make a new life for herself away from the painful memories. Now she was 23, and that new life was about to end if she could not reach safety. She crept past the back of the general store, the livery stable, the church. The jailhouse was just ahead, a sturdy building made of stone and timber. Light glowed in the windows. Someone was inside. Taking a deep breath, Dahlia ran across the open space and up the steps. She pounded on the door with both fists. "Sheriff Kane, please, I need help." The door opened almost immediately, and Dahlia found herself face to face with a man she had only seen from a distance before. Garrett Kane was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his eyes were a startling shade of green that seemed to see right through her. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms. His gun belt hung on his narrow hips, the holster tied down like a man who knew how to use it. "Miss Owens," he said, and she was surprised he knew her name. "What's wrong? They killed him," she gasped, stumbling into the office when he stepped aside. "Samuel Pritchard. They shot him in the alley behind the silver dollar, and they saw me. They saw me watching." Garrett's expression hardened. He closed the door and locked it, then moved to the window to look out at the street. "Who killed him?" "I don't know the man's name, but he was wearing an expensive suit, dark hair, about 40 years old, and your deputy was with him. Harrison Blackwell. They're searching for me now." Garrett turned back to face her, his jaw tight. "Harrison isn't my deputy. He works for the territorial marshal's office, or so he claims. I've suspected for months that he's dirty, but I've had no proof." He studied her face, and Dahlia became acutely aware of how disheveled she must look, her hair wild, her dress dusty from the alleys. "You're certain about what you saw?" "I'm certain. The man in the suit shot Samuel point blank. They talked about hiding the body in the river. They said Samuel should have kept quiet about something he saw at the railroad office." Garrett nodded slowly, processing this information. "The railroad's been trying to force people to sell their land. There have been rumors of fraud, forged documents. If Samuel discovered evidence of that, it would explain why they killed him." He moved to his desk and began loading bullets into his spare revolver. "You cannot stay here. If Blackwell is involved, he has access to this building. He could walk in at any moment." "Then where can I go?" Dahlia heard the desperation in her own voice. "They'll search my room, my workplace. They'll watch the stage depot and the train station." Garrett was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he looked at her with those penetrating green eyes. "I'm going to hide you where no one would think to look, but you have to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Dahlia had no choice. She nodded. "Good. We need to move now, before they organize a proper search." He grabbed his hat from the peg by the door and shrugged into a vest. "Stay close to me and keep your head down." They slipped out the back door of the jailhouse into a small yard enclosed by a fence. Garrett led her to a gate that opened onto another alley. The town seemed quieter now, most of the businesses closing for the night, but Dahlia could still hear men calling to each other in the distance. "This way," Garrett said quietly, taking her elbow to guide her through the darkness. They moved quickly through the back streets, heading away from the center of town. Dahlia realized they were going toward the residential area where the more prosperous citizens lived. Large houses sat back from the street, surrounded by gardens and white picket fences. Garrett stopped in front of one of the largest homes, a two-story structure painted white with dark green shutters. Dahlia stared at it in confusion. "This is your house?" she asked. "It came with the job," Garrett said. "The town council wanted to make sure the sheriff had proper accommodations. They're trying to attract a better class of lawmen." There was a hint of irony in his voice. "No one would ever think to look for you here in the sheriff's own home." He was right, but the impropriety of the situation suddenly hit Dahlia. "I cannot stay here alone with you. My reputation would be ruined." "Your reputation will not matter much if you're dead," Garrett said bluntly. He opened the gate and gestured for her to follow. "I've thought this through. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives in the small cottage out back. As far as anyone knows, you'll be staying with her. She's a widow from San Francisco, came here with the railroad workers. She's trustworthy." They went around to the back of the house, and Garrett knocked softly on the door of a small cottage partially hidden by trees. After a moment, an older Chinese woman opened the door, her eyes widening when she saw them. "Sheriff Kane, what is happening?" Mrs. Chen, I need your help. This is Miss Dahlia Owens. She witnessed a murder tonight and the killers are searching for her. She needs a place to hide, somewhere no one would think to look. I want to bring her into my house, but for propriety's sake, I need you to be there as a chaperone." Mrs. Chen looked at Dahlia, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. Then she nodded. "I will help. Come inside, both of you." The cottage was small but neat, with simple furniture and the lingering scent of jasmine tea. Mrs. Chen lit another lamp and gestured for them to sit. "Tell me everything," she said. Garrett explained the situation quickly and efficiently while Dahlia sat quietly, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The reality of what had happened was beginning to sink in. She had witnessed a murder. Men were hunting her. Her entire life had been upended in the space of minutes. "How long must she hide?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Until I can gather enough evidence to arrest everyone involved and make sure they hang for what they've done," Garrett said. "I'll need to investigate carefully. If I move too soon and cannot make the charges stick, Miss Owens will never be safe." "Then we must be very careful," Mrs. Chen said. She turned to Dahlia. "You will stay in the main house in the guest room upstairs. I will be there during the day, cooking and cleaning as always. At night, I will sleep in the room next to yours. No one will question this arrangement." "Thank you," Dahlia whispered. "Thank you both." Garrett stood. "We should get you inside before anyone sees. Mrs. Chen, can you bring some of your clothes for Miss Owens? She'll need something to wear. Of course, give me a moment." While Mrs. Chen gathered items, Garrett looked at Dahlia. "I know this is frightening, but I promise you I will keep you safe. I will find the evidence we need and I will bring these men to justice." There was something in his voice, a quiet certainty that made Dahlia believe him. She stood, straightening her spine. "What can I do to help?" "Tell me everything you remember. Every detail, no matter how small." They went into the main house through the back door. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with good furniture and thick rugs on the polished wood floors. Garrett led her to a parlor and they sat while she recounted every moment of what she had witnessed. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions, his green eyes never leaving her face. "The man in the suit, you said he was about 40. Any scars, distinctive features?" Dahlia closed her eyes, picturing the scene. He had a gold ring on his right hand, very ornate, and a watch chain, also gold. His suit was dark blue, expensive fabric. He had a scar on his left cheek, thin like from a knife. "That's good. Very good. Anything else?" He had an accent, slight but noticeable. "Eastern, maybe Boston or New York." Garrett nodded. "That matches someone I've been watching. Silas Thornton. He came to town 2 months ago, claims to be a railroad investor, bought a house on the north side, throws money around. But something about him never felt right. You think he's the one? I think he's exactly the kind of man who would kill to protect a fraudulent land scheme." Garrett leaned back in his chair. "The question is how to prove it." Mrs. Chen arrived with an armful of clothes and some personal items. She showed Dahlia upstairs to a pleasant room with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a window overlooking the back garden. It was far nicer than her small rented room above the dress shop. "You will be safe here," Mrs. Chen said kindly. "Try to rest. Tomorrow we will work out the details." After Mrs. Chen left, Dahlia stood at the window, looking out at the darkened garden. Her mind was whirling with everything that had happened. This morning, she had woken up expecting an ordinary day of sewing and fitting dresses. Now she was hiding in the sheriff's house, a witness to murder, her life in danger. A soft knock on the door made her turn. Garrett stood in the doorway, his expression serious. "I wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said. "I'm fine, thank you." Dahlia hesitated, then asked, "Why are you doing this? You could have just hidden me in the jail overnight and put me on a stage out of town in the morning." Garrett was quiet for a moment. Because that would not solve the problem. These men would still be free. They would still be committing fraud, and they would kill again if they needed to. And because no one should have to run from justice when they did nothing wrong. He paused. "And because I've seen you around town, Miss Owens. You work hard, you're kind to people. You deserve better than to spend your life looking over your shoulder." The sincerity in his voice made something warm unfold in Dahlia's chest. "Thank you, Sheriff Kane." "Garrett," he said, "if we're going to be living under the same roof, even temporarily, you should call me Garrett." "Then you should call me Dahlia." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less severe. "Good night, Dahlia. Lock your door and don't worry, I'm a light sleeper. No one will get past me." After he left, Dahlia did lock the door. She changed into one of Mrs. Chen's nightgowns, which was a bit short on her taller frame but clean and comfortable. She climbed into bed, expecting to lie awake for hours, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from downstairs. For a moment she forgot where she was, then memory came flooding back. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. A gentle knock on the door. "Miss Owens." "I have brought you water for washing and some clothes." Mrs. Chen's voice. Dahlia unlocked the door and let her in. The older woman carried a pitcher of warm water and had several dresses draped over her arm. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," Dahlia admitted. "That is good. The sheriff has already been up for hours. He went into town before dawn to see what news there is." Mrs. Chen set down the pitcher and laid out the clothes on the bed. "These should fit you better than my nightgown. I altered them last night." Dahlia was touched by the kindness. "Thank you, you did not have to do that. I wanted to help. Now wash and dress, then come down for breakfast. You must keep your strength up." Dahlia washed her face and hands in the basin, then examined the dresses. Mrs. Chen had excellent taste and the alterations were expertly done. She chose a simple day dress in pale blue cotton and managed to pin up her hair into a respectable bun. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she looked almost normal, not like a woman hiding for her life. Downstairs, the kitchen was bright and welcoming. Mrs. Chen had prepared a substantial breakfast of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee. Dahlia sat at the small table, suddenly ravenous. "The sheriff, he is a good man," Mrs. Chen said as she poured coffee. "He treats me with respect, not like some who think I am beneath them because I am Chinese. When I needed help last winter, when men threw rocks at my cottage, he arrested them. He made them pay for the damage and apologize. He seems very committed to justice," Dahlia said. "He is committed to what is right. That is rarer than you might think." Mrs. Chen sat down across from her with her own cup of tea. "You are safe here, Miss Owens. I want you to know that." They were finishing breakfast when the back door opened and Garrett came in. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but he managed to smile when he saw them. "Good morning." "I hope you slept well, Dahlia." "I did, thank you." "What news?" Garrett poured himself coffee and sat down heavily. "The official story is that Samuel Pritchard left town late last night, heading to Kansas City on business. His horse and some of his belongings are missing from his room at the boarding house." "They're covering it up," Dahlia said, her stomach clenching. "Of course they are. And there's more. Men were asking about you at the dress shop this morning. They told your employer you had family business in Topeka and would not be returning for a while. They cleaned out your room and took your things." Dahlia felt cold all over. "They were in my room. I'm sorry. I know that's a violation. But it also means they're trying to establish that you left town voluntarily. They do not want a big search because that would draw attention. They're hoping you actually did run, that you're scared enough to keep quiet. What do we do now? Dahlia asked. I continue investigating. I need to find Samuel's body, and I need to find evidence of the railroad fraud he discovered. I've sent a telegram to an old friend of mine, a Texas Ranger named Marcus Webb. He has connections with the federal marshals. If I can prove corruption goes high enough, we can bring in outside law enforcement. How long will that take? I don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. Garrett looked at her with those intense green eyes. I know this is not the life you wanted, hiding in my house. But I promise you, I will work as quickly as I can. I trust you, Dahlia said, and she meant it. Over the next few days, a strange new routine developed. Garrett would leave early in the morning to patrol the town and conduct his investigation. Dahlia spent her days with Mrs. Chen, helping with household tasks to keep herself busy. She learned to cook Chinese dishes, to tend the garden, to do the more intricate mending that Mrs. Chen's aging eyes found difficult. In the evenings, Garrett would return and share what he had learned. He was careful, methodical, gathering information piece by piece. He discovered that Silas Thornton had indeed been meeting regularly with Harrison Blackwell and several other men, including a lawyer named Pemberton and a clerk from the land office. The railroad was systematically defrauding farmers and ranchers, using forged documents to claim their land when they refused to sell. Samuel must have found the forged documents, Garrett said one evening as they sat in the parlor after supper. Mrs. Chen was in the kitchen, giving them a measure of privacy though the door remained open for propriety. He worked part-time at the land office filing papers. He would have seen them. Can you get the documents? Dahlia asked. Not without a warrant, and I cannot get a warrant without revealing what I know. It's a difficult situation. Garrett rubbed his eyes tiredly. I'm waiting to hear back from Marcus. If he can get federal marshals involved, we can move quickly. Dahlia watched him, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. He was carrying the weight of this investigation alone, trying to bring down powerful men while keeping her safe. It could not be easy. You should rest, she said gently. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You're not fine. You barely sleep. Mrs. Chen says you're up before dawn every day and you do not get home until late. You need to take care of yourself. Garrett looked at her, surprised. I did not realize you were paying such close attention. Dahlia felt heat rise in her cheeks. The truth was, she had been paying very close attention to Garrett Kane. It was impossible not to. They were living in the same house, sharing meals, talking every evening about the investigation. She had learned that he took his coffee black, that he read law books late at night when he could not sleep, that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed. She had learned that he was unfailingly courteous to Mrs. Chen, that he was patient and thorough in his work, that he had a strong sense of honor that guided everything he did. She had also noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his hands moved with careful precision, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her. She had noticed, and she had started to feel things she had no business feeling for a man who was simply protecting her out of duty. I just worry, she said, looking down at her hands. You're doing so much for me. I'm doing my job, Garrett said, but his voice was gentle, and I want to do it. I want to keep you safe, Dahlia. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of understanding and connection that made Dahlia's breath catch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mrs. Chen came in with a tray of tea, breaking the spell. You both need rest, she said firmly. Tomorrow is another day. That night, lying in bed, Dahlia admitted to herself what she had been trying to ignore. She was developing feelings for Garrett Kane, deep feelings. It was foolish, she knew. This situation was temporary. Once the danger was over, she would leave, go back to her normal life, or perhaps move to another town. She and Garrett came from different worlds. He was a respected lawman with a dangerous job. She was a seamstress, a woman with no family and few prospects, but her heart did not care about logic. Her heart had noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her skin warm. Her heart had memorized the sound of his voice, the rare beauty of his smile. Her heart was falling, and she did not know how to stop it. A week into her stay at Garrett's house, things began to change. Garrett received a telegram from his Texas Ranger friend. Federal marshals were interested in the case, but needed more concrete evidence before they could intervene. Garrett intensified his investigation, and Dahlia could see the toll it was taking on him. One evening he came home later than usual, his knuckles bruised and his shirt torn. Dahlia, who had been waiting anxiously with Mrs. Chen, rushed to him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Garrett said, but he winced as he moved. "You are not fine. Sit down." Dahlia guided him to a chair while Mrs. Chen hurried to get water and clean cloths. "What happened?" "I was asking questions at the Silver Dollar. Some of Thornton's men took exception to it. We had a disagreement." "A disagreement that left you bruised and bleeding." "You should see them," Garrett said with a slight smile, then winced again. Dahlia knelt in front of him and began carefully cleaning the blood from his knuckles. His hands were large and strong, scarred from years of hard work and harder fights. She found herself touching him with more care than was strictly necessary, her fingers lingering on his skin. "You need to be more careful," she said quietly. "If something happened to you because of me, I could not bear it." Garrett's hand turned under hers, his fingers curling around hers gently. "Dahlia, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I'm not doing this just because of you," he said. "I'm doing this because it's right. Because these men are criminals and they need to be stopped. You gave me the evidence I needed to go after them. You're not a burden. You're a gift." The word hung in the air between them. Dahlia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. His hand was still holding hers, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was unmistakably tender. "Garrett," she whispered, not even sure what she wanted to say. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat delicately from the doorway. "The water is getting cold." They pulled apart, both of them flushed. Dahlia finished tending to Garrett's injuries in silence, acutely aware of every point where their bodies nearly touched, every breath, every glance. That night marked a shift in their relationship. The careful formality began to erode, replaced by something warmer, more intimate. They started sitting closer together in the evenings. Their conversations ranged beyond the investigation to more personal topics. Garrett told her about growing up in Missouri, about joining the Army during the last years of the war between the states at just 17, about drifting west afterward and finding his calling in law enforcement. Dahlia told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her father's work as a tailor, her decision to come west after his death to escape the pity of neighbors and the memories of loss. "I wanted to be someone new," she said one evening as they sat in the garden behind the house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I thought I could leave the past behind and reinvent myself." "Did it work?" Garrett asked. He was sitting beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "For a while. I liked my work at the dress shop, I liked the independence, but I was lonely, I think. I had acquaintances but no real friends. I kept people at a distance." She paused. "Until now." "Until now," she turned to look at him. "These past 2 weeks hiding here with you and Mrs. Chen have been some of the happiest of my life. Isn't that strange? I should be terrified, I should be miserable, but instead I feel like I've finally found a place where I belong." Garrett's eyes were very green in the fading light. "I don't think that's strange at all. I feel the same way." "You do? This house has been just a building to me since I moved to Wichita, a place to sleep between work, but with you here it feels like a home." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I look forward to coming home now, to seeing you, to talking with you. You've changed everything, Dahlia." She could barely breathe. "Garrett, we should not, this is not, I know," he said softly. "I know this started as me protecting a witness. I know you're here because you have nowhere else to go. I know I should maintain professional distance. But God help me, Dahlia, I cannot stop thinking about you. I cannot stop wanting to be near you." "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I tried not to. I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or the circumstances throwing us together, but it's more than that. You're more than that." They were so close now, their faces just inches apart. Garrett's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her lower lip in a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with tears. "If I kiss you," he said, his voice rough, "I won't be able to pretend this is just professional anymore." "Then don't pretend," Dahlia said. He kissed her as the sun set over Wichita, a kiss that was gentle at first, almost reverent, then deepened with all the longing they had both been suppressing. Dahlia's hands came up to his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she went willingly, melting into his embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he said. "I think I've been since the moment you ran into my office, terrified and brave and so damn beautiful." "I'm falling in love with you too," Dahlia admitted. "I did not want to, I was afraid, but I cannot help it." "Then don't help it. Let yourself fall, I'll catch you, I promise." They kissed again, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. Mrs. Chen, watching from the kitchen window, smiled to herself and went back to her tea. The next 2 weeks were the most bittersweet of Dahlia's life. During the day, she continued her routine of helping Mrs. Chen while Garrett worked tirelessly on the investigation. But the evenings were theirs. They would eat dinner together, the three of them, then Mrs. Chen would discreetly retire early, leaving Garrett and Dahlia in the parlor or the garden. They talked about everything and nothing. They made plans for a future that seemed increasingly possible. Garrett spoke of building a life together once this was all over, of courting her properly, of marriage. Dahlia let herself believe in it, let herself hope. They were careful to maintain propriety, never going beyond kissing, always aware of Mrs. Chen in the house. But those kisses were enough to sustain Dahlia, to make her feel alive in a way she never had before. Meanwhile, Garrett's investigation was bearing fruit. He discovered that Samuel's horse had been sold to a ranch outside of town, evidence that contradicted the story of Samuel leaving for Kansas City. He found a clerk at the land office who was willing to testify that he had been pressured to falsify documents. He documented meetings between Thornton, Blackwell, and the others. Then, 3 weeks after Dahlia had witnessed the murder, everything came to a head. Garrett came home in the middle of the afternoon, his face grim. Dahlia knew immediately that something was wrong. "What is it?" Marcus telegraphed. "The federal marshals are coming, but not for 2 more days. And I just got word that Thornton is planning to leave town tomorrow night. If he runs, we may never get another chance at him." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to arrest him tonight. I have enough evidence to hold him, and once the marshals arrive, we can build the full case." Garrett took her hands in his. "But I need you to stay here, stay safe. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," Dahlia said firmly, though fear clutched at her heart. You're good at what you do. You'll arrest him and bring him to justice. I need to tell you something in case he stopped, swallowed hard. I love you, Dahlia. I want a life with you. I want to marry you and build a home with you and grow old with you. I need you to know that. Tears filled Dahlia's eyes. I love you too. And you will come back to me, Garrett Kane, because we have a future to build together. You hear me? He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. They stood there for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. That evening, Garrett prepared carefully. He checked his weapons, pinned on his badge, put on his hat. Dahlia helped him, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted his collar. I'll be back before midnight, he promised. I'm bringing in deputies from the county, men I know I can trust. We'll arrest Thornton, Blackwell, Pemberton, all of them. And then this will all be over. Be careful, always, Em. He kissed her soft and sweet. I love you. I love you too. Dahlia and Mrs. Chen watched him ride away into the gathering dusk, then went inside to wait. The hours crawled by. Dahlia tried to read, to sew, to do anything to keep her hands and mind busy, but she could not concentrate. Mrs. Chen made tea that neither of them drank. 9 o'clock came and went. 10 o'clock. 11. At 11:30 they heard horses outside. Dahlia rushed to the window, her heart in her throat. In the darkness she could see several riders. One of them was Garrett. She ran to the door and flung it open. Garrett dismounted and came up the steps, and she could see even in the dim light that he was smiling. It's done, he said. We got all of them. Thornton, Blackwell, Pemberton, 3 others. They're all in jail awaiting the marshals. Dahlia threw her arms around him, not caring who saw, not caring about propriety. He held her tight, his face buried in her hair. It's over, he murmured. You're safe now. The other deputies tipped their hats and rode away, tactfully leaving them alone. Mrs. Chen stood in the doorway, beaming. I knew you would succeed, she said. Now come inside. You both need rest. But neither Garrett nor Dahlia wanted to rest. They sat up for hours, Garrett telling her everything that had happened. The arrests had gone smoothly, thanks to the element of surprise. Thornton had tried to resist, but Garrett had overpowered him. The others had surrendered when they realized they were outnumbered. We found the forged documents in Thornton's safe, Garrett said. And more importantly, we found Samuel's body. Thornton had it hidden in the cellar of his house, preserved with ice. He was planning to dispose of it when he left town. Dahlia shuddered. That poor man. He'll have justice now. They all will. The marshals will arrive in 2 days, and this whole corrupt network will be dismantled. Garrett took her hand. And you gave your statement tonight to the deputies I trust. When the marshals get here, you'll testify formally, but after that, you're free. Free to live your life without fear. What life do I have? Dahlia asked. I lost my job, my room, everything I owned is gone, Garrett smiled. You have a life here with me if you want it. You know I do. Then marry me, Dahlia, properly with a church and a preacher and witnesses. Marry me and stay in this house and make it a home. Build a life with me here in Wichita. Yes, Dahlia said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her, deep and thorough, sealing the promise. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The federal marshals arrived and took over the case. Dahlia gave her testimony, describing in detail what she had witnessed that night behind the Silver Dollar Saloon. Her statement, combined with the physical evidence and the testimony of other witnesses Garrett had found, created an overwhelming case against Thornton and his associates. The trial was held in Topeka, at the federal courthouse, to ensure impartiality. Dahlia traveled there with Garrett, staying at a respectable hotel with Mrs. Chen as her chaperone. She testified clearly and calmly, telling the jury exactly what she had seen. The defense attorney tried to shake her story, but she did not waver. The The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Silas Thornton was found guilty of murder, fraud, conspiracy, and a host of other charges. He was sentenced to hang. Harrison Blackwell and the others received lengthy prison sentences. Justice was served. Dahlia and Garrett returned to Wichita to prepare for their wedding. The town, which had been buzzing with gossip about the scandal and the trial, now turned its attention to the upcoming nuptials. The sheriff was marrying the brave young woman who had helped bring down a murderous conspiracy. It was the stuff of dime novels. They were married on a bright September morning in 1881, just 2 months after that fateful night when Dahlia had witnessed a murder. The church was packed with townspeople, many of whom Dahlia had never met but who wanted to be part of the celebration. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Dahlia wore a dress she had made herself, a beautiful creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her dark hair was pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. She carried a simple bouquet of wildflowers. Garrett stood at the altar in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle. When she reached him, he took her hand, and they spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Garrett kissed her to enthusiastic applause from the congregation. The reception was held at their house, with tables set up in the garden. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, creating a feast that blended American and Chinese dishes in a way that delighted everyone. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. As the sun began to set, Garrett pulled Dahlia away from the crowd for a quiet moment alone. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said. "A few months ago I thought my life was over. Now I have a husband I love, a home, a future. It's more than I ever dreamed of." "You deserve all of it and more," Garrett said. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much I love you. I already know, but I won't object to reminders." He kissed her as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Their life together settled into a comfortable rhythm. Garrett continued his work as sheriff, and Dahlia discovered she enjoyed being a lawman's wife. She involved herself in community activities, started a small dressmaking business from home for ladies who appreciated her skill, and became good friends with several women in town. Mrs. Chen remained with them, a beloved member of their household. She taught Dahlia more of her recipes, shared stories of her life in China and San Francisco, and became like a mother to both of them. A year after their marriage, Dahlia discovered she was pregnant. Garrett was overjoyed, though he became absurdly overprotective, trying to keep her from doing anything strenuous. "I'm having a baby, not suffering from a fatal illness," Dahlia told him, laughing. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "But you're my wife, and I want you safe," he insisted. "I am safe, the safest I've ever been." Their first child, a son, was born in the spring of 1883. They named him Samuel in honor of the man whose death had brought them together. He was a healthy, robust baby with Garrett's green eyes and Dahlia's dark hair. Garrett was an attentive father, involved in every aspect of his son's care in a way that some men found unusual but Dahlia appreciated. He would walk the floor with Samuel at night when the baby was fussy, change his diapers without complaint, and spend hours just watching him sleep. "I never thought I'd have this," he told Dahlia one night as they stood together over their son's cradle. "A family, a home, someone to come back to. You have it now, and you're wonderful at it." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter whom they named Grace. She had her mother's features and her father's determined personality. Then, 3 years after that, Another son arrived, healthy and loud, whom they called James. Their house was full of noise and love and life. Mrs. Chen delighted in the children, teaching them to speak both English and Chinese, filling them with stories and wisdom. Garrett's career continued to flourish. He became known as one of the finest sheriffs in Kansas, respected for his integrity and his commitment to justice. He was offered positions in larger cities, but he always turned them down. Wichita was home. Dahlia's dressmaking business grew into a thriving enterprise. She employed 3 other seamstresses and supplied fine dresses to ladies throughout the region. She was known for her skill, her reasonable prices, and her kindness to her workers. The years passed, marked by the ordinary joys and sorrows of life. They celebrated birthdays and holidays. They mourned when Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, having lived with them for over 20 years. They watched their children grow, guiding them with love and firm boundaries. Samuel grew into a serious young man who studied law, determined to follow in his father's footsteps in pursuing justice. Grace became a teacher, passionate about education and helping children. James developed a talent for working with horses and opened a successful breeding operation outside of town. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Garrett and Dahlia sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset. They were both in their late 40s now, their hair showing threads of silver, their faces marked by the passage of time, but still recognizable as the young people who had fallen in love under such extraordinary circumstances. "You ever think about that night?" Dahlia asked, her hand in Garrett's. "The night I came running to your office." "Sometimes," Garrett said. "I think about how close we came to never having this. If you had not been brave enough to come to me, if I had not had the idea to hide you in my house, if any number of things had gone differently, we might never have found each other." "Fate," Dahlia said softly, "or providence, or just extraordinary luck. Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it every day." Garrett lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Dahlia Kane, and you're the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Inside the house, they could hear their children and grandchildren. Samuel had married and had 2 children of his own. Grace had a baby daughter. James had brought his fiancée for dinner. The house was full, as it so often was these days, with the sound of family. "We built a good life," Garrett said. "We built a beautiful life," Dahlia corrected. As the stars began to appear, they went inside to join their family, hand in hand, still as much in love as they had been that first night when a terrified woman had run to a principled sheriff for help, and found not just safety, but her soulmate. The years continued to unfold with gentle grace. Garrett served as sheriff of Wichita until he was 60, at which point he retired to spend more time with his growing family. By then, Dahlia had also stepped back from the daily operations of her dressmaking business, handing it over to capable hands while she focused on being a grandmother. They traveled some, taking trips they had always dreamed of. They visited San Francisco, where Mrs. Chen had come from, and left flowers at the Chinese cemetery in her honor. They went to Philadelphia, so Dahlia could show Garrett where she had grown up, walking the streets of her childhood and visiting her father's grave. They spent time in Dodge City, where Garrett introduced Dahlia to old friends from his lawman days. But they always came back to Wichita, to the White House with the green shutters that had sheltered them through so many years. It was where they belonged. Their children thrived. Samuel became a circuit judge, known for his fairness and wisdom. Grace ran a school for girls that became one of the finest educational institutions in Kansas. James's horse breeding operation supplied animals to ranches throughout the West. All three of them married well and had children who filled Garrett and Dahlia's lives with joy. On a warm evening in June of 1911, 30 years after their wedding, Garrett and Dahlia celebrated their anniversary with a party that brought together 3 generations of family. The house and garden overflowed with children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. There was music and laughter, good food and better company. As the party wound down and the younger children were put to bed, the older family members gathered in the parlor. Samuel raised a glass in toast to his parents. "To the two of you," he said, "you showed us what love looks like, what commitment means, what it is to build a life together based on respect, trust, and devotion. You gave us a foundation of love that has shaped all of our lives. We are who we are because of you." Garrett and Dahlia, sitting close together on the sofa they had shared for 3 decades, looked at each other with tears in their eyes. "We are the lucky ones," Garrett said. "We found each other against all odds, and we've had the privilege of building this life, this family. Every day with you, Dahlia, has been a gift. Every day with you has been a blessing," Dahlia said. "I ran to you in fear and you gave me safety. But more than that, you gave me love. You gave me a home. You gave me everything." They kissed, and their children and grandchildren applauded, not embarrassed but delighted by their parents' enduring affection. Later, after everyone had gone home or retired to bed, Garrett and Dahlia sat together in the garden, in the same spot where they had first confessed their love all those years ago. The bench was older now, weathered by time as were they. But the garden still bloomed, and the stars still shone overhead, and they were still together. "You have any regrets?" Dahlia asked softly. Garrett was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret that Samuel Pritchard had to die. I regret that you had to go through the fear of being hunted. I regret the pain and difficulty of those early days." He paused. "But I cannot regret the outcome. I cannot regret finding you, loving you, building this life with you. So no, my darling, no regrets." "Neither do I," Dahlia said. "It was hard and frightening, but it brought me to you. And you were worth every moment of fear." They sat together under the stars, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built something rare and precious. A love that had weathered time and trials, a family that would carry their legacy forward. A life well lived together. As they finally went inside to bed, walking slowly up the stairs with Garrett's arm around Dahlia's waist to steady her, they passed the photographs on the wall that documented their years together. Their wedding day, the births of their children, family gatherings and celebrations. Each image was a moment captured in time, a testament to the life they had shared. In their bedroom, they helped each other prepare for bed as they had done for 30 years, the routine familiar and comforting. They climbed into bed together, and Garrett pulled Dahlia close, her head resting on his shoulder as it had on countless nights before. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. They fell asleep like that, together, as they had been since that fateful night in July of 1881, when a witness to murder had run to a principled sheriff for help and found the love of her life. The years that followed were gentle ones. Garrett's health began to fail slowly when he was in his early 70s, his body wearing out after a lifetime of hard work and the injuries accumulated during his years as a lawman. Dahlia cared for him tenderly, and he accepted her ministrations with grace, though he grumbled about being a burden. "You are not a burden," Dahlia told him firmly. "You cared for me when I was carrying our children. You nursed me through illness. You've supported me every day of our marriage. Let me do this for you." He did, and they found new rhythms in their days, shorter walks in the garden, quiet afternoons reading together in the parlor, visits from children and grandchildren that brought light and energy to the house. Dahlia remained healthy and active well into her 70s, her mind sharp and her spirit undimmed. She continued to sew, creating beautiful quilts for each of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wrote down the story of how she and Garrett had met, preserving it for future generations. On a quiet morning in April of 1916, Garrett Kane passed away peacefully in his sleep, his hand clasped in Dahlia's. He was 73 years old and had been married to the love of his life for 35 years. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire town of Wichita. People came from all over Kansas to pay their respects to a man who had served justice with honor for so many years. The church could not hold everyone who wanted to attend. Dahlia stood beside the grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and said goodbye to the man who had saved her life and then made it worth living. She did not break down, though tears streamed down her face. She was strong as she had always been, as Garrett had always known she was. After the funeral, she returned to the house they had shared. It felt empty without him, quiet in a way it had never been before. But it was still full of memories, full of love. She could feel his presence in every room, in every corner of the garden. Dahlia lived for another 8 years after Garrett's death. She remained active and involved in her family's lives, a matriarch who was deeply loved and respected. She attended the weddings of her grandchildren, held her great-great-grandchildren, and dispensed wisdom and love to all who came to her. She never remarried, never even considered it. Garrett had been the love of her life, and she was content to live with his memory and the legacy they had built together. On a summer evening in 1924, Dahlia Owens Kane passed away quietly in her sleep, in the same bed where she and Garrett had slept for so many years. She was 83 years old. Her children found her the next morning, peaceful and still, a slight smile on her face. On the nightstand beside her was the photograph from her wedding day. Garrett young and handsome in his black suit, Dahlia radiant in her ivory dress, both of them looking at each other with such love that it shone from the aged photograph. She was buried beside Garrett in the Wichita cemetery, their graves side by side as they had been side by side in life. The headstone bore both their names and beneath, an inscription chosen by their children. Together in life, together in death, together in love eternal. Their story became a legend in Wichita, passed down through generations. The tale of a young woman who witnessed a murder and ran to a principled sheriff for help. Of how he hid her in his own home, right under the noses of the men who hunted her. Of how they fell in love while bringing criminals to justice. Of how they built a life together that lasted over 3 decades and produced a legacy of family, service, and love. The house where they lived stood for many years after their deaths, eventually becoming a historical landmark. Visitors would come to see the place where Sheriff Garrett Kane had hidden witness Dahlia Owens, where they had courted and married, where they had raised their family. The garden where they had sat together on so many evenings was preserved, the old bench restored and maintained. Their descendants continued to live in Wichita and throughout Kansas, carrying forward the values of integrity, courage, and love that Garrett and Dahlia had embodied. They told the story to their children and grandchildren, keeping alive the memory of 2 remarkable people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had created something beautiful and lasting. In the archives of the Kansas Historical Society, researchers could still find the court records from the trial of Silas Thornton, including Dahlia's testimony. They could read Garrett's reports on the investigation, meticulous and thorough. They could see the evidence of a crime that had been solved through courage and determination. But more than the historical records, more than the preserved house, and the stories passed down, the real legacy of Garrett and Dahlia Kane lived on in their family. In the judge who presided with fairness and wisdom, in the teacher who educated with passion and kindness, in the rancher who treated his workers with respect, in the countless descendants who lived lives of integrity and love, shaped by the example set more than a century before. The story of a woman who witnessed something that could get her killed, and a cowboy sheriff who hid her where no one would look, was ultimately a story of love conquering fear, of justice prevailing over corruption, and of two souls finding each other and creating something that would outlast them both. It was a story that deserved to be remembered, and it was. For generations to come, when people spoke of Wichita, Kansas in the Wild West days, they spoke of Sheriff Garrett Kane and his wife Dahlia, two people who had faced danger together and emerged stronger, who had built a life on a foundation of love and trust, and who had proved that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most unlikely ways. Their love had been tested by danger and hardship, but it had emerged unbreakable. It had grown deeper with each passing year, richer with each shared experience. And though both of them eventually passed from this world, the love they had created lived on, a testament to what two people could build when they gave each other their whole hearts. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the danger they had faced or the criminals they had defeated, but the love they had found and nurtured and protected for over 3 decades. A love that had started with a terrified woman running to a principled man for help and had grown into something eternal. Theirs was a love story for the ages, set against the backdrop of the Wild West, filled with danger and courage and justice, but ultimately about two people who found in each other everything they had been searching for. And they lived it fully, loved completely, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. The story ended, as all good love stories should, with two people who had found each other against all odds, who had loved each other deeply and truly, and who had built a life together that was rich with meaning and full of joy. They had faced death and danger, but they had conquered it with love. They had started as strangers thrown together by circumstance, but they had become partners, lovers, husband and wife, parents and grandparents, two halves of a whole that was greater than either of them alone. And in the quiet cemetery in Wichita, Kansas, their graves stood side by side beneath the wide western sky, a final resting place for two souls who had journeyed through life hand in hand, and who even in death remained together, their love undiminished by time, unbroken by mortality, eternal as the stars that shone above the wild prairie where they had found each other so long ago.